Dr. Amanda Cross stood in the quiet procedure room at Naval Medical Center San Diego's Military Working Dog Clinic, preparing for what she believed would be a routine, though heartbreaking, euthanasia. At 39, with 11 years treating military working dogs, she'd performed this procedure more times than she cared to count. Each one left scars on her heart that professional distance couldn't quite heal. The file before her detailed K9 Echo, an 11-year-old German shepherd with end-stage hemangiosarcoma, a vicious cancer that had metastasized from his spleen to his lungs and liver. The medical evidence was damning. X-rays showing tumor masses, blood work indicating organ failure, catastrophic weight loss of 23 pounds in just 6 weeks. Prognosis: days to weeks of declining quality of life, pain management ineffective, euthanasia recommended. Echo's handler, former Master Chief Petty Officer Connor Hayes, had requested to be present for the procedure. Amanda had met Connor 3 weeks ago when the diagnosis was delivered. A 43-year-old man with the weathered face and quiet intensity that came from 22 years as a Navy SEAL. He'd retired 14 months ago, transitioning to civilian life with the kind of struggle most operators faced when warfare became memory instead of mission. Echo had been scheduled for adoption by Connor the moment retirement paperwork cleared. The process was almost complete, just final signatures and transfer documentation. Then the cancer diagnosis came with devastating speed and impossibly cruel timing. Connor had spent every day since sleeping on the floor of Echo's kennel, refusing to let his partner die alone in clinical space. The kennel staff had initially protested, protocol violations, liability concerns, until Amanda had authorized it. Some bonds transcended regulations. As Amanda prepared the sodium pentobarbital injection, the barbiturate solution that would stop Echo's heart peacefully, painlessly, Connor entered the procedure room with Echo walking slowly beside him. The dog was visibly frail, ribs showing through dull coat, breathing labored despite oxygen supplementation, eyes dimmed by pain medication that could only do so much against organ failure. Echo moved with the careful deliberation of an animal whose body was shutting down. Amanda had placed a padded mat on the floor rather than using the examination table. Handlers deserved to hold their partners at ground level, in embrace rather than restraint. It was a small kindness, but it mattered. "Master Chief," Amanda said gently, "we'll start with sedation. Echo will just feel sleepy, drift off. Then the final injection through the IV catheter. It's very fast, very peaceful." Connor nodded without speaking. His jaw was clenched against emotion that 22 years of SEAL discipline tried to suppress. But Amanda had seen this before. Operators who could withstand torture, who'd faced death repeatedly, who crumbled when their K9 partners reached the end. Connor knelt beside Echo on the padded mat. The dog leaned into him immediately, seeking comfort in the presence that had defined over a decade of shared service. 3 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. Explosive detection work that had saved countless lives. Handler and K9 bonded through combat in ways civilians couldn't fully comprehend. Connor wrapped both arms around Echo's neck in a final embrace, forehead pressed against the dog's shoulder, whispering words Amanda couldn't hear but recognized as goodbye. She'd given handlers privacy for this moment dozens of times, the final conversation between partners who'd survived war together. Amanda turned to prepare the sedative, giving them space. She drew the appropriate dose based on Echo's current weight, checked the IV catheter placement she'd established earlier, and reached for the injection port. Something made her pause. Professional instinct, maybe, or the same attention to detail that had made her successful as a military veterinarian. Whatever the reason, Amanda looked back at Connor and Echo one more time before administering the sedation. That's when she saw it. Connor's shirt had ridden up during the embrace, exposing his lower back and abdomen. A massive scar ran across his midsection, not the clean line of surgical incision, but the ragged, poorly healed wound pattern that came from trauma. Shrapnel injury, Amanda's trained eye recognized. The kind of catastrophic damage that should have been fatal. Extending from beneath Echo's collar, visible where Connor's embrace had shifted the leather, was a matching scar pattern on the dog's left shoulder. Amanda had assumed it was combat injury. Shrapnel damage was common in military working dogs who served in hostile territory, but as Connor shifted position, adjusting his embrace to hold Echo tighter during their final moments together, Amanda noticed something that stopped her breathing. The scars aligned. Connor's abdominal wound and Echo's shoulder scar formed a continuous pattern when they embraced. Not two separate injuries, but one trajectory. The angle was unmistakable to someone who treated ballistic trauma for over a decade. These weren't independent wounds from different incidents. This was one injury shared between man and dog. Amanda's mind raced through the implications. Echo's scar placement suggested he'd been positioned between Connor and a blast source. The trajectory indicated the dog had intercepted shrapnel that would have struck Connor at abdominal level, likely fatal given the fragmentation pattern. Echo hadn't just been injured in the same blast that ended Connor's career. The dog had used his own body as a shield. Amanda set down the syringe, her hands suddenly unsteady. Medical training kicked in, overriding the emotional weight of what she was about to do. "Master Chief," she said carefully, "I'm seeing irregular heart rhythm on the monitor. I need to do a full cardiac assessment before we proceed." It was a lie. Echo's heart rhythm was exactly what she'd expect in a dog with advanced cancer. But protocol allowed veterinarians to delay euthanasia for medical assessment. It was the only justification she could use to buy time. Connor looked up, confusion and raw grief breaking through his controlled expression. "What?" The cardiologist cleared him last week. His heart was the only thing not failing. "I just need to verify something," Amanda said, her voice steady despite internal alarm bells. "Can you step back for a moment?" Connor released Echo reluctantly, moving to the side. The dog remained on the mat, too weak to follow, watching his handler with absolute trust. Amanda knelt beside Echo, her hands moving through practiced examination. She palpated the scar tissue on his shoulder. Old injury, 15 months healed, consistent with the timeline in his medical file. But the size and depth suggested more than the minor laceration his records indicated. "Master Chief," Amanda asked quietly, trying to keep her voice neutral, "how did you get that scar on your abdomen?" Connor's expression shifted from confusion to guarded. "IED blast. Afghanistan. 15 months ago. Why does it matter now?" Was Echo injured in the same incident? "Yeah. Shoulder wound. He was treated in theater, cleared for duty. I was medevaced to Germany." "Why are you asking about this?" Connor's tactical mind was engaging, recognizing that Amanda's questions had purpose beyond small talk. Amanda pulled up Echo's complete military medical file on her tablet, scrolling through deployment records and injury reports. The entry from 15 months ago was brief. K9 Echo, shoulder laceration from shrapnel, treated and released, cleared for continued service. Nothing about life-threatening injury. Nothing about intercepting a blast meant for his handler. Just a routine combat wound that happened to occur during the same incident that catastrophically injured Connor. But the scars told a different story, and Amanda's 11 years of treating military working dogs had taught her to trust physical evidence over paperwork. "Master Chief, I need you to be completely honest with me," Amanda said, meeting Connor's eyes. "When that IED detonated, where was Echo positioned?" Connor's jaw tightened. "Between me and the blast. We were breaching a compound. I was on point. Echo was at my left heel. The device triggered when I crossed the threshold. Echo," his voice cracked. "Echo stepped in front of me, took the shrapnel that would have gutted me. He saved my life." Amanda looked at the dog lying on the padded mat, breathing laboriously, supposedly hours away from death due to cancer. Looked at the scar that represented absolute loyalty, the kind that intercepted explosions. "I need to run additional tests," Amanda said. "Doctor, he's dying. The X-rays showed—" "I know what the X-rays showed," Amanda interrupted gently. "But something doesn't add up. Just give me a few hours." Connor looked at Echo, at Amanda, at the syringe she'd set aside. "If you're giving me hope and it's false, I'm giving you truth," Amanda said. "Whatever that turns out to be." Amanda worked through the night, pulling medical records she shouldn't technically have access to, but retrieved through contacts in personnel systems who owed her favors. She cross-referenced Echo's complete military medical file with Connor's retirement paperwork, deployment records, and the official after-action report from the Kandahar province IED incident. The timeline crystallized. Connor and Echo injured in the same blast 15 months ago. Connor's file showed catastrophic abdominal trauma from shrapnel, emergency surgery in theater, medical evacuation to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, then stateside to Naval Medical Center San Diego. 3 surgeries, 6 months of recovery, medical retirement with full disability. Echo's file showed shoulder laceration, treated at forward operating base, cleared for duty within a week. But the scar patterns Amanda had observed didn't match the disparate severity described in the files. If Echo had simply suffered a minor shoulder wound while Connor took catastrophic abdominal trauma, the scarring wouldn't align the way it did during their embrace. Amanda pulled Echo's original post-blast X-rays from 15 months ago, the imaging that had cleared him for continued service. His spleen appeared completely healthy. No masses, no abnormalities. Standard architecture for a working dog his age. She compared those images to the recent diagnostics that had justified the euthanasia order, X-rays taken 3 weeks ago showing extensive tumor masses in the spleen, lungs, and liver. The progression timeline made her pause. Hemangiosarcoma was aggressive, but not this aggressive. The cancer typically developed over months, even years. For Echo to go from completely healthy spleen to end-stage multi-organ metastasis in 13 months seemed wrong. Amanda made a decision that could end her career. She ran a new blood panel on samples she'd drawn during the cardiac assessment, this time testing for something the original diagnostics hadn't checked: heavy metal poisoning. The results came back at 3 a.m. Amanda stared at her computer screen, her medical training warring with disbelief. Echo's blood work showed elevated levels of depleted uranium and other heavy metals consistent with exposure to specific types of IEDs used in Afghanistan. The compounds were toxic, slowly poisoning his system over months, and the tumor masses visible on X-rays. Amanda pulled up the imaging again, examining them with new perspective. They weren't cancerous growths, they were granulomas, inflammatory masses formed around retained foreign bodies. Shrapnel fragments embedded in Echo's shoulder had been slowly releasing toxic metals into his bloodstream for 15 months. Echo wasn't dying of cancer. He was dying of poisoning from the same blast that should have killed Connor. The blast Echo had intercepted with his own body. Amanda called Connor at 4 a.m. "Master Chief, I need you to come to the clinic, now." 20 minutes later, Connor stood in Amanda's office staring at the blood test results and comparative X-ray images she'd laid out. "He's been carrying shrapnel for 15 months, Amanda explained. "Small fragments lodged deep in the shoulder tissue. They've been releasing heavy metals, depleted uranium primarily. It's been slowly poisoning him. The cancer diagnosis was wrong. These aren't tumors. They're inflammatory responses to toxic metal exposure." Connor's tactical mind processed the information with frightening speed. Someone misdiagnosed him. Or, his expression darkened, someone deliberately diagnosed him wrong. "Why would anyone do that?" Amanda asked. "Because Echo shrapnel fragments are evidence," Connor said quietly, "of what really happened during that mission." Together, they pulled the official after-action report from the Kandahar operation. The IED blast was listed as defensive measure by enemy combatants during compound breach, standard language for hostile action. But Connor had always questioned the narrative. The timing was wrong. We'd swept the approach. The blast pattern was inconsistent with defensive IEDs. It was command detonated, triggered remotely when I crossed the threshold. Someone with inside knowledge of our entry point. Amanda's medical mind connected dots her tactical training hadn't prepared her for. If Echo's shrapnel fragments were properly analyzed, they'd match a specific blast signature, Connor finished. Could identify the device type, potentially the manufacturer or supplier. Echo's shoulder has been carrying evidence for 15 months that could prove the IED wasn't enemy action. "Who filed the euthanasia order?" Amanda asked. Connor pulled up the authorization on Amanda's computer. The signature made him go pale. Captain Warren Drake, commanding officer of the K-9 program and hospital administrator. Drake was the intelligence liaison for the Kandahar operation, Connor said, his voice dropping to dangerous calm. He was responsible for confirming the location was safe before we entered. If the IED was inside a setup, Amanda's office phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "That was the duty officer," she said after hanging up. "Captain Drake just issued an urgent directive for Echo's immediate euthanasia. He's citing risk of zoonotic disease transmission. It's an emergency medical justification that bypasses all standard review." Connor stood. "He knows we're looking into this. He's eliminating evidence." Amanda's hands were shaking. "I can't refuse a direct order from the hospital CO. If he declares it's an emergency, then we don't give him time to execute it," Connor said. He was already on his phone, calling numbers Amanda recognized from context. NCIS, base legal, former teammates who'd know what to do when chain of command was compromised. 30 minutes later, Captain Drake arrived at the clinic with 2 military police officers and a revised medical order declaring Echo must be euthanized within the hour due to suspected zoonotic pathogen exposure requiring immediate containment. It was complete fabrication. Echo had no infectious disease, but the emergency protocols gave Drake authority to bypass Amanda's medical judgment and execute the order himself, if necessary. Connor met Drake in the clinic's main corridor, positioning himself between the captain and the kennel area where Echo rested. Amanda stood beside him, her heart pounding. "Master Chief Callahan," Drake said, with forced professionalism. "This is a medical emergency. Stand aside." "This animal is federal property under my legal adoption petition," Connor said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a SEAL operator. "You don't touch him without lawful order. And this," he held up his phone showing the blood test results Amanda had sent him, "proves your medical justification is false. Echo doesn't have cancer. He has heavy metal poisoning from shrapnel he's been carrying for 15 months. Drake's expression flickered. "That's irrelevant to the current—" "Shrapnel from the Kandahar IED, Connor continued. "The one you certified was clear before my team breached. The one that nearly killed me. The one Echo intercepted. His shoulder has been carrying physical evidence of what really happened for 15 months, and you want him dead before anyone analyzes those fragments." Drake's professional facade cracked. "You have no authority here, Callahan. You're retired. This is a medical facility under my command." The clinic entrance opened. NCIS Special Agent Ramirez walked in, flanked by federal marshals, holding identification and legal documents. "Captain Drake," Ramirez said formally, "you're under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. Dr. Cross provided sworn testimony and medical evidence this morning. We have warrants for Echo's medical transfer to independent facility and forensic analysis of embedded shrapnel." Drake's face went pale. "This is absurd. I'm the commanding officer. You're the intelligence liaison who provided target clearance for the Kandahar operation," Ramirez interrupted. "The operation where an IED nearly killed Master Chief Callahan and did kill your equipment procurement fraud investigation. We've been building this case for 8 months. Echo's shrapnel fragments will prove the blast signature matches devices manufactured by the Afghan contractor you were taking kickbacks from. The same contractor whose substandard body armor got 3 SEALs killed on previous missions." Connor's expression was ice. "You tried to kill me because I was reporting your fraud. Echo stopped that, and you've spent 15 months trying to destroy the evidence he's been carrying." The MPs who'd accompanied Drake stepped away, recognizing they'd been used to facilitate obstruction of justice rather than enforce legitimate medical protocol. Agent Ramirez placed Drake under arrest. The captain's final words as marshals escorted him out. "It was just equipment procurement. Just business." 3 SEALs died wearing your defective armor," Connor said quietly. "And you tried to kill me for reporting it. That's not business. That's murder." Echo underwent emergency surgery 72 hours later at an independent veterinary facility specializing in complex trauma care. Amanda performed the procedure personally, spending 6 hours carefully extracting 14 shrapnel fragments embedded deep in Echo's shoulder tissue. The fragments were catalogued as evidence, each piece documented with forensic precision. NCIS metallurgy analysis confirmed they matched the blast signature of IEDs manufactured by Hekmat Defense Solutions, the Afghan contractor Drake had been receiving kickbacks from for equipment procurement. The fragments proved the Kandahar device wasn't enemy action. It was an assassination attempt using Drake's contractor's explosives, placed based on Drake's intelligence about Connor's investigation and team movements. Echo's Cancer diagnosis had been Drake's final attempt to destroy evidence before Connor's adoption finalized, and Echo received the comprehensive medical examination that would have revealed the truth. Drake faced federal charges, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, obstruction of justice, and 17 violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The investigation expanded to include the procurement fraud that had killed 3 SEALs through defective body armor. Financial records showed Drake had received $2.3 million in kickbacks over 4 years. Connor's medical discharge was upgraded to wounded in action status with full combat-related benefits. He received formal commendation for his investigation of the fraud ring, the investigation that had nearly cost him his life. The Navy issued official apology for the mischaracterization of the IED blast as enemy action. Echo was awarded the Commendation Medal for military working dogs, recognition that his actions had saved not just Connor's life, but had prevented future casualties by preserving evidence that exposed a murderous fraud scheme. After surgery, Echo's recovery was gradual but remarkable. As the heavy metal toxicity cleared from his system, his condition improved dramatically. He gained weight, his breathing normalized. The pain that had seemed terminal was actually treatable. Anti-inflammatory medication for the surgical site, chelation therapy to remove residual metals, physical rehabilitation for muscle atrophy. Amanda monitored him personally, staying late every night at the independent facility where Echo recovered. She'd moved him there to ensure Drake's replacement couldn't interfere with treatment. Connor slept on the clinic floor again, but this time not in grief preparation, in hope maintenance. 3 months later, Echo's adoption was finalized. The paperwork that should have cleared a year ago finally processed without obstruction. Echo was officially retired from military service and transferred to Connor's permanent custody. The retirement ceremony was held in the clinic's courtyard, surrounded by handlers whose dogs had served alongside Echo during his 11-year career. American flag presented, honors rendered, a procession of K9s and handlers acknowledging one of their own. When the ceremony concluded, Echo walked, strong, steady, healthy, to Connor's side and sat with perfect operational discipline. His coat had regained its shine. His eyes were clear. His body showed no trace of the terminal cancer that had sentenced him to death 3 months earlier. Connor knelt for an embrace, and Amanda saw the scars align again. Man and dog, wounded together, healed together. Connor looked up at Amanda, his eyes holding gratitude that words couldn't adequately express. "You saved his life by noticing a scar." Amanda shook her head. "I saved his life by seeing what you two have always known. You're not handler and dog. You're brothers, and brothers protect each other no matter the cost." Echo's tail wagged, not the weak movement of a dying dog, but the vigorous contentment of a warrior who knew he was finally safe, finally home, finally done running missions for anyone except the man who loved him. 1 year later, Connor and Amanda were married in a small ceremony on Coronado Beach. The relationship had developed gradually, built on shared commitment to protecting military working dogs, sustained by mutual respect for the bonds between handlers and K9 partners. Echo served as best man, wearing a tactical vest with the title embroidered across the back. He walked down the aisle, carrying the rings in a specialized pouch, moving with the same professional discipline that had defined his military career. During the reception, a young SEAL handler approached Connor nervously. He was facing retirement, his K9 partner scheduled for adoption, but the paperwork was tangled in bureaucratic delays and medical questions. "Master Chief Callahan," the young handler said, "could I ask your advice about adopting my partner?" Connor introduced him to Echo, who sat patiently beside Amanda's chair, graying muzzle resting on crossed paws. "This dog took shrapnel meant for me, carried toxic metal in his shoulder for 15 months without complaint. When I thought I was losing him, a veterinarian noticed one scar during a final embrace that changed everything." He gestured to the scar visible on Echo's shoulder, now just a mark of survival rather than poisoning. "The lesson isn't about scars. It's about looking close enough to see the truth. Your dog already protected you in ways you'll never fully know. Don't let paperwork, protocols, or bad diagnoses steal what you've earned together." The young handler knelt beside Echo, his hand gentle on the dog's head. Echo leaned into the touch, the same instinct that made him a shield, now making him a mentor. Amanda watched her husband work with the young handler, watched Echo provide the living proof that military working dogs could survive, could heal, could transition from war to peace. She thought about the moment 3 months ago when she'd paused before administering the euthanasia injection. One observation, one scar pattern that aligned too perfectly. One question asked instead of an assumption followed. The shocking thing Amanda had seen during that final embrace wasn't just matching scars. It was evidence of absolute loyalty, the kind that intercepts explosions meant for someone else, the kind that carries toxic metal for 15 months without complaint, the kind that refuses to die until the truth is told. Echo hadn't just saved Connor's life in Afghanistan, he'd saved it again in a veterinary clinic by bearing scars that revealed conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. As the reception continued, Echo rested beside Connor's chair, occasionally glancing up at his handler with amber eyes that held contentment. His right front paw tapped gently against the sand. Not communication, just the comfortable rhythm of a dog completely at peace. Connor's hand found its familiar position on Echo's head. "Good boy. Best boy. We made it." Echo's tail wagged agreement. Sometimes the most critical medical observation wasn't what was documented in files. It was what was written on the body of a dog who loved his handler enough to become a shield, and a veterinarian who loved her patients enough to question terminal diagnoses that contradicted observable reality. Amanda had saved Echo's life, but Echo and Connor had saved each other repeatedly, in combat, in investigation, in the final embrace where scars aligned and truth became visible. The observation that shocked the veterinarian had exposed a conspiracy, saved a life, and proved that sometimes the best medicine was simply paying attention when everything else said to look away.